Hi everyone, you're watching the Virtual Amicus and I am Jay Lodha. Well, they say that a book is a person's best friend. They also say that what reading is to the mind is what exercise is to the body. But is it true when you pick up a commentary on taxation? Or is it true when you pick up a commentary on securities law? Is it very boring? Is it a dry subject or you do enjoy reading it? So, what exactly how do you develop a reading habit? Can you cultivate it over a period of time? How does one become a voracious reader? And does reading help you in your litigation? Does it help you in your skills as a lawyer, in your arguments? Does it help you improve your argument substantially? So, joining us today is a very special guest. Uh, she is a lawyer by profession. Her name is Mrs. Aanchal Singh Rathore. She passed out of Mayo College Law School, and subsequently she did her graduation from GLC where she studied law. She's worked with DNA as a journalist. She's also the co-founder of the initiative called "A Book is the Smartest Handheld Device." She started practice with the chambers of Mr. R.B. Mathur, advocate, and she's currently working in the esteemed chambers of Major R.P. Singh, senior advocate, as well as additional advocate general of Rajasthan. So thank you so much, Mrs. Rathore, for sparing out time on a on a Sunday morning and on a subject that is of interest of everyone, reading habit and the blend between the law and the literature. So what we've done is so today's segment is slightly different. We've kept a Q&A session instead of a regular presentation mode, and we'll be asking a list of questions that we've prepared to our speaker today. So, Mrs. Rathore, if you're ready, can we start?
Yeah, sure. First of all, I'd like to thank you for thinking of me for this session. But yeah, let's start now.
Yes. So here we go. When did you first discover your love for reading, and did you ever have a favorite book that kept going back to?
Okay, so the love for reading or reading as a habit was not really a discovery. It was more of a transition into a sort of a lifestyle that I experienced. Because whenever we talk about, say, like you mentioned, that I have the initiative that I have, a book is the smartest handheld device. We have a number of young parents coming to us and asking that how do we inculcate the reading habit in kids, and we tell them that when you are reading, the kid is going to ape. So the same thing happened with me. My dad is a voracious reader, so it was a very staple thing that whenever we were going on a trip anywhere, it would be a trip to a bookstore was a mandatory thing. Like nothing, anything could be compromised on, but a trip to the bookstore used to be there. So it was from there that I inculcated the habit of reading. Plus, because I was in a hostel in my school life and did not really have any other mode of entertainment except for reading books. So that also probably reinforced this entire habit of reading books. As far as a favorite book that is concerned, I think I can't point to any one book, because as our life progresses and as we come to different stages of life, the preferences change. So for right now, this one book that I think is brilliant and I think everybody should read it is The Boy, the Mole, the Fox, and the Horse by Charlie Mackesy. And it's a beautiful book which you probably a non-reader can also finish in say 5 or 10 minutes. I don't think more than that is required for that book, because it kind of gives you the philosophy and the essence of life. So that is one book that I keep going to, and I think I read like one page of it every day. That is one book that currently I keep going back to.
Wow, amazing. So, which means that reading habit has been an integral part of the Rathore household. So everybody has been a passionate reader.
Yeah.
Wait, by the way, I just finished reading this interesting book called The Supreme Whispers, written by
I
Mr.
know, Charlie.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and I was fortunate
Yeah,
enough
that's on my to read list.
yeah, and I was very extremely fortunate because both Chavi and I we got a note from him.
Wasn't he in our college as well?
This was the Jaipur Literature Festival
Oh,
back
okay.
in
And in
2019.
fact, he's written a few number of other books also, which are very interesting.
Yes, yes. So we were really fortunate that we met him there, and that is where we got a copy of this book. So really nice. It's a very good read. Uh,
Yes,
so
it is a very good read.
yes.
Yeah.
Now coming to our next question. So obviously, Aanchal, now that in the legal profession, one has to remain up to date and read all the time when it comes to case laws, statutes. Uh, so does this reading habit become a monotonous thing, or does it at all help in any kind of value addition? Even when you go through these commentaries, or when you go through these student edition books, or when you pick up a constitution commentary and go through it. So does it at all affect your normal reading habit when you're reading a fiction book, or do you think it helps in any kind of value addition to your habit?
You know, so for the viewers, I just tell all the viewers that these questions that you had given me earlier, like a little framework or so. So when I was reading this particular question, I had read Murakami's this one quote, which I had to go back and like get the exact thing that reads that if you're reading the books everyone is reading, you can only think what everyone is thinking, right? So as a lawyer, everybody is reading constitution, everybody is reading the statute, everybody is reading the commentaries. What value addition are you doing to your argument when you are going and standing on the dais if you're not reading say something which can probably widen your horizon and add more to your argument? So it's very, and I understand that, and Jay, very honestly, very frankly, reading few of our judgments, I think our judgments have not left a single genre of reading. That you've got drama in our judgments, you've got thrillers in our judgments, you've got horror stories in our judgments, you've got everything in our judgments, right? So one sometimes feels that yeah, judgment hi pad lo, usme hi kafi ho jayega. But reading books, reading something which is apart from the is aside from your profession, reading those books, it kind of makes you a exact person. I think it was Oscar Wilde who said this, that reading makes an exact person, or I think Mark Twain, one of them, I'm getting confused between both of them. I think one of them said this. And this goes without saying that when you're reading a book, number one, it opens up your imagination. Number two, it gives you a clarity of thought. And number three, it gives you a clarity of expression. So, and which are sign to announce to our profession, we have to be imaginative, because when we're reading the statute, we have to reimagine that statute. We have to reimagine the interpretation of that statute and present it with clarity to the judge. So there has to be a clarity of thought, and there also has to be a clarity of expression, because if you have clarity of thought, that's all well and good. But if you can't express it well in front of the judge, then what is the point of that clarity? So these three things which are there, and these clarity of thought and clarity of expression also helps you in drafting, and you know it very well, that how important drafting is to our profession as a litigation lawyer. Drafting is one of the basic essentials that we cannot do without. Argument is one thing on which our livelihood depends on. We have to argue. So if you are not clear in the arguments, then how different are you and from the others? So of course, reading is very important. Apart from the commentaries that we have to read, apart from the mandatory reading, that just makes you an exact person, a clear person, not in just terms of thought, but also expression.
So is there any particular book that helped you in value addition, or in a particular case that really helped you probably get an order from the court which is favorable, or you managed to get an adjournment?
Not did not help me get an adjournment. I think me adjournments. I think we are two different corners of the same spectrum, that I never get any adjournment at all. I either have to argue the case or I get held back by the judge. So adjournments are something वो मेरे को नहीं करते हैं. So I remember reading Indu Bhan's Legal Eagles, which is basically she's a legal journalist, and she's written about the doings of our profession. And there I don't remember exactly what judgment it was or exactly what case it was, But I remember like underlining that and going back to my case file and seeing कि अगर वो fact same है और judgment पढ़ने के बाद, so that is one place where that helped me. The other book which did not really help me in any particular case as per se, but in my profession, it kind of injected that motivation, that zeal, that enthusiasm and the passion was Arvind Datar's Palkiwala, the Courtroom Genius. I cannot emphasize enough how that book is just like, it just injects so much of passion when you're reading that book. That book is, I think that should be like a Quran, Bhagavad Gita, Bible for all of us, to be very honest, because the way Palkiwala, we all know Palkiwala is Palkiwala. He's like any lawyer worth his salt knows what Palkiwala is all about, right? Now, Palkiwala's, Arvind Datar has written about his entire his entire legal life, his professional life. And when you read that, you are floored. I mean, that man would take client meetings at 4 in the morning. He would utilize his time which by taking client meetings, for example, if he has to take a flight and he's going from Fort to Bandra to the airport, he's going to take a client meeting while then. I mean, can you ever think that हम लोग सी स्कीम से एयरपोर्ट जा रहे तो हमें क्लाइंट को बुला लेके भैया आ जाओ चलो तुम्हारी क्लाइंट मीटिंग यहीं पे ले लेते हैं, and he would actually make notes on airplane boarding passes, he would actually make notes on tissue papers, anything, whatever idea that would come to his mind, he would just jot it down on paper. And that is, majority of his arguments did not entail like these notes or something. Okay, they would have like these chits of papers, and on that he would base like his entire argument. Of course, he would prepare the brief really well. So that is one book that has been very important and that has been kind of very instrumental in kind of making me passionate, inject a little passion, how much ever it is, in my profession.
I think that's precisely the reason why the book is titled The Courtroom Genius, because somebody making notes on a tissue paper on a boarding pass. Wow, that's.
And somebody taking a client meeting at 4 a.m. in the morning. Condition of the client that Palkiwala ko to lena hi hai, engage karna hi hai. There's nobody better than Palkiwala. Chalo 4 baje uthna hi padega.
And getting up at 4 in the morning itself is a task. And then doing a meeting then.
Now this, when you read about Palkiwala, you're like, he was getting up at 4 in the morning. We got to get up. Once he had achieved that status in life, he was doing that. So we are just starting with our professional life. We are novices in front of him. This is the least that we can do. That sort of a thing, So these sort of books, what self-help books do to a personality development of a human being, Palkiwala, the Courtroom Genius, would probably do for a lawyer who wants to make a mark for himself or herself. So
I think Mr. Datar did mention about this in one of his webinars. I think this is the same book which is co-authored by Mr. Surabji, if I'm not wrong. Right?
Yes.
So to all the viewers who are watching, this recommendation has come from a voracious reader, Mrs. Rathore, The Courtroom Genius by Mr. Datar, along with Mr. Surabji, who we unfortunately lost recently. He lost his battle to COVID-19. And again, another legend, someone who was a legal stalwart that we lost recently. So, oh, nice. But Mrs. Rathore, one thing, when I entered the legal profession, all my seniors used to, whoever used to, जो भी mentor करते थे या guide करते थे, they always used to tell me that arguments have to be crisp, simple, you have to be to the point. Then on the other hand, you have these books that, that really want, that you want to take your inspiration from, you want your guidances from, these words of wisdom coming out. How does one maintain a balance? Like the moment you start using legal maxims or any of the anecdotes, it becomes a problem for you, because then ultimately your job is to represent your client in a legal court of law and put forward the facts. So how do you maintain that balance?
See, maintaining the balance, when I say that reading books, apart from what a mandatory reading is, I don't mean that any book and every book that you read, you pick up a quote and then you put it in your arguments unnecessarily. that is not how it is. What my purpose of saying that reading is important for a lawyer is because when you read, like I said, it widens your horizons, it gives you a clarity of thought, it gives you a clarity of argument, it helps you reimagine, it helps you become creative. See, by the end of it, I was watching this interview of Menaka Guruswamy and Devrat Patnaik, where Menaka Guruswamy very aptly called lawyers wordsmiths. She said that authors and lawyers have one thing in common, that we are all wordsmiths. And when you look at it, we actually are wordsmiths. So, see, everybody used to say, there was a time I remember in my childhood, my dad used to make me do vocabulary, a word per day. Why was that important? Because once your vocabulary is huge, you have an array of words to choose from, and you become you use an exact word. If you don't know what word to use, then you're as clueless, and you're shooting an arrow in the dark. So of course you can go to in before a judge, and you can argue your matters, and you can just put your client's view forward to before the judge, that way ye iske merits hain, ye demerits hum bolte hain, these are the merits, and this is the law that is supporting me, and this is the judgment that is supporting me. Nobody is saying that aap ye nahi, aap sirf itne mein you will not be successful. Not, that's not my point. The point is that to interpret that law in probably a different way, which kind of helps you in your matter, that is also more important. And to kind of be able to reimagine one situation in various ways, right? That is the power which comes when your mind is wide, when the horizons of your mind is widened, when there is clarity of thought, when you know how to kind of translate that clear thought on paper and orally before a judge. So that is one thing which will become inherent in you as a reader.
That's so true. And I think if reading habit was a meal, then Mrs. Rathore has a huge appetite. So, but also having said that, I think practically speaking, it's very important to understand that only when you reach that stature or status in the profession, you can take the liberty of using those maxims and those fanciful terms. Also, when you do it, when you're just a newcomer in the profession, you try to summarize everything, you try to be crisp and to the point. And I think over a period of time, you learn how to use them, interpret them, and use them to your advantage. And so, can this reading?
To say one thing,
Yeah,
I just like to say one thing, that there's no hard and fast rule that you can use the maxims and anecdotes in legal, other literature while you're arguing, only when you have made a mark for yourself. I remember I was sitting in, I think probably Honorable Justice Alok Sharma's court, and there was a young lawyer. I think she came only for that particular matter. She came and she argued, and she used maxims, and she used a number of, like, she quoted a number of these quotes from other from other books, which kind of made me also interested in listening to that argument. You generally, when you're sitting in the court, if the arguments are very interesting, you're listening to the arguments, or you're probably just thinking about your own matter, or you're just thinking कि यार आएगा नहीं आएगा matter पता नहीं, should we go, should we wait, ऐसा वो that's what's कि उस court में कौन सा matter आ गया, that's what. But her argument was so interesting that I think everybody in the court was actually listening to it, right? And it's not just for the lawyers. I mean, I remember reading Justice Karju's one of his blogs, where he said that he has used Shero Shayari so generously in all his judgments, And one judgment which I remember reading was Arna Shahbaz's judgment, which I've written down that Shayari, it was Ghalib's share which he used when he was deciding that the mercy killing petition of Arna Shahbaz. So he says, मरते हैं आरज़ू में मरने की, मौत आती है पर आती नहीं. So using a share in something as sensitive and as complex as mercy killing, but that shade hitting the entire discussion or right on its head. I mean, that is something that we, as lawyers, and as law has really, taken a lot from literature, and vice versa. Literature has taken a lot from law as well. So they're like interdependent, and they have a huge debt to each other. So to just read law books and not read the literature books, or not read anything apart from the mandatory commentaries in the statutes, I think that would just kind of restrict us as lawyers. Yeah.
Great. A quick question there. So, can this reading habit develop, or can a person work on it, or is it something that comes naturally to you?
Of course, you can work on it. See, not a lot of people are as fortunate as I am, who had, like, I had my dad who was a voracious reader. So he was my role model for everything that he has been and will continue to be my role model for everything that I do in my life. And to see him read, I initially I would just open a book and be like, I want to be like daddy. That's all. And then gradually it was Enid Blyton who kind of, started that thing. Initially, you remember how kids never read anything without pictures. So it was actually Enid Blyton's books which kind of, made me believe that yes, I can read books without pictures. Right. So it was Enid Blyton who started that. But it's never too late to start. So there's a book by James Clear called Atomic Habits. That book gives a rule of 1%. He says that once, if you want to inculcate a good habit, facilitate that habit. Say, for example, if you want to inculcate the habit of reading every day. So what you do is you keep a book on your nightstand and you make sure that you read one page daily. Nothing more, nothing less. Reading one page, even for the slowest of reader, I don't think it takes more than 10 minutes. Right? This is, I'm saying, for the slowest reader. It does not take more than 5 minutes maximum, depending on what sort of a book you're reading. But make sure that you're consistent with that. And along with consistency, give yourself space. That if one day you could not read, does not mean that, oh, I cannot inculcate this habit. If you cannot read for one day, then the next day read one page. ऐसा नहीं है कि आपको backlog आपका clear करना है, नहीं, वो आप एक दिन का एक ही वो पढ़ो. And if that is also not possible कि भाई नहीं बहुत busy है, कल एक बहुत major matter है, this and that and this and that, just read one line. Just read one line, you will be ahead of what you were yesterday. So this consistency, and of course, giving yourself space and having that 1% rule of Atomic Habits by James Clear, I think that is one thing. If we keep that in mind, any habit can be inculcated.
In my case, it was the Hardy Boys and the Three Investigators.
Yeah, I think our generation, I think it's either Hardy Boys. These are the books that kind of got us started on books.
So, any book that your senior ever gifted to you that was really very special to you, or that you wish to recommend to all the viewers watching, if you were not gifted by any of the seniors?
I was not gifted any book by any senior.
Great, high five.
We are in the same boat. But of course, like I overheard a conversation, I think in the corridors only, long back when I was probably in 10th standard, and I just like visiting the High Court, that, oh, let's go see how the High Court is. This is where I have to come one day types. So that was this one book by the same book, James Clear, Atomic Habits. This was one book which either I overheard it in the corridors or I overheard somebody having a conversation somewhere. I don't remember where. It was I don't even remember the senior, but I just remember. Oh yes, it was Justice Alok Sharma who was telling somebody to read this book, James Clear, Atomic Habits. So that is one book which I picked up, like I told you, the 1% rule, and that is what how I told you that self-help books kind of help you in personality development overall. That was one book which really helped me, and it had a very practical approach to how to kind of chisel away the unnecessary drama in your life, or chisel away the unnecessary rackets that are there in life, in fact.
So, the last book that you read and the next book that you plan to read?
The last book that I read was the last book that I read, I don't really remember. I think it was something, it was Ka by Robert Pilasso. I'm still reading it actually. It's about mythology and it's about spirituality, in fact. And the next book that I want to read is Abhinav Chandrachud. I have got 3-4 books of his that I want to read. Then I want to read this. The next book that I really want to pick up is Gautam Bhatia's Shock, Offend and Defend. It's about the constitutions across the globe. These are the few books that, in fact, if you come to my room and you see my nightstand, there's a pile loads of books which are kept, which need to be read, which are just like looking at me, that feeling ignored. So those are the books which I have to read.
Couple of books that I wish to recommend to all the viewers. One would be 10 Judgments That Changed India. It was by Zia Modi. And it's a brilliant read, and it talks about all those 10 landmark judgments from Article 21, right to life, right to livelihood, personal liberty, Shah Bano, all these landmark cases that were dealt by various courts in the country. And some other books like The Judgments That Shook India by Prashant Bhushan, then The Judgments That India Forgot by Chindan Chandrachud, Abhinav Chandrachud's younger brother. So, these are really very good reads, and if a person wants to get a hold of them, you can very well buy them.
In fact, apart from Nani Palkiwala, Courtroom Genius, I think reading, apart from Arvind Datta's book, I think reading Nani Palkiwala's books also is going to be one thing that, kind of will help us in our careers, not just in our careers, but even in personality development as citizens of democracy. I think Palkiwala's books are also brilliant.
I think there's this one really very special book that I read cover to cover during my first internship, and you know how first internships are. You don't quite care about what is happening and how much you're learning. So I used to carry that book with me to court. I used to sit there, read. I didn't even understand anything about the electronic notice board and which cases listed where. All I cared about was that book that I carried with me. It was Before Memory Fades by Fali Nariman. That's again
Yes.
a very good read.
Yes, that's also that. Then there's one more book by Justice Leela Seth, Vikram Seth's mother. I think it was her autobiography, which is beautiful. I mean, for female lawyers, female lawyers or aspiring lawyers, I think that is one book which gives you so much of strength to see that lady kind of balanced her life. And I had the good fortune of actually meeting her during the Jaipur Literature Festival, and such a lovely, humble soul. And when you meet such people, when you read about them, meeting, of course, she's left us. She left us a few years back. When you read, so the only way to kind of connect to her, the only way to kind of get to know the deepest thoughts of her mind are to read her book. So reading her book is as close as you can get to her. And I think for us to read, to actually see that, yes, there was somebody who struggled the way we are struggling here, because leave aside the fact that we are young lawyers and we are budding lawyers, add on to that we are female lawyers. So it becomes a little more complex cocktail potpourri which is there, at least in our High Court. So there are a number of stereotypes that you have to fight against, a number of biases which are there. Okay, so I don't want to sensationalize this entire thing, but when you read that book of Justice, that autobiography by Justice Leela Seth, you know that, okay, this is something not very new that's happening to me. It's something which people have dealt with, and you've got to deal with it now as well. So that is one book. Then another book is MC Chadra's Roses in December. That was the first book that my father actually gave me standing on the Churchgate station when he was leaving me in Bombay dropping me off for my college. The first day in college, that was the book that was given to me. MC Chandra, The Roses in December. That was a beautiful book.
And your favorite legal stalwart when it comes to admiring him in the capacity of a writer, or any of his favorite books that you wish to mention? Because you've mentioned Datar, you've mentioned
Datar, of course. Datar goes without saying Datar. I'm like, I fangirl over Datar any day, because Number one, that the first internship that not law internship, the first job that I took up as a lawyer was with Mr. R.B. Mathur, who I consider my guru. But Mr. R.B. Mathur, going there in the tax world, I was feeling lost. So it's when it comes to tax, it's either R.B. boss, who I'm like, yeah, he knows everything about tax, or it's Mr. Datta. So, you get fascinated towards things that you don't know yourself a lot, that you're not confident about. So I think this is my fangirling over Arvind Datta is the manifestation of my lack of knowledge about tax law, to be very honest, and his beautifully written book about Patkiwala. One, of course, Mr. Datta goes without saying. Then, of course, MC Chagla is there. He's written beautifully. Then Justice Leela Seth is there. And moving from the author part, I mean, he has authored a number of judgments, but he's not written a book. And I really, really want him by इस video के माध्यम से, I think I want to appeal to him to write a book that is Justice Aanchal Sharma. I think all the young lawyers really want to see a book written by him because his judgments were such a feast for people with a literary bent of mind. I mean, I remember reading a judgment of his where he used the phrase gymnastics of interpretation. I mean, how he has kind of I left speechless when I think about what sort of judgments he writes. They are such a feast for all of us, although not always very favorable for the parties there, but still for us as young lawyers and as somebody with a literary bent of mind, I think those are a feast to read.
So a good seasoned lawyer would boast of two qualities, right? A good drafting, a set of skills, and then good quality of arguments before the court.
I'm sorry, your voice is breaking. What?
So reading habit and good drafting skills, is there a link between the two?
Reading and good drafting skills. Like I said, drafting requires you to be clear. You have to be clear. There has to be a clarity of thought and clarity of expression and articulation. If you're not articulate while you're drafting, I mean, I am a novice when it comes to drafting, so I will not speak a lot about drafting because I am still honing that skill. I mean, we come from that sort of a category of lawyers who are still learning a lot, right? But from what seniors tell me and from what I have experienced myself, that when I'm reading, there are times when you're reading like at a stretch for months. And then there are times when you just cannot for the life of you pick up a book because by the time you reach home and you hit your bed, you're just like, let me just sleep. There's no other, I can't even think of doing anything else. There are times that there are stretch of periods when you're doing that, when you can't pick up any book. So I have myself experienced that my expression, my articulation, my remembering the proper words, that goes down when I'm not reading. So I think that is very important. Reading, like I said, reading makes an exact man. Now, being an exact man, whether you're speaking or whether you're writing. And in our profession, exact and articulate speech and exact and articulate drafting. That is what kind of, separates you from the rest.
So last question for the segment. Quickly choose one out of the two. Reading for pleasure, reading for the profession.
Reading for pleasure, any day. यार प्रोफेशन में वैसे इतनी रीडिंग हो जाती है आप करा रहे हो, but reading for pleasure any day. Because then you have that you can go on your own rhythm, you can go in your own tempo, you have your own you interact with the book. So another thing that I wanted to add to that question that you asked, I'm sorry, I'm going back to that question, that how to inculcate the habit. Not just consistency is required. I mean, you should be able to interact with the book. I mean, believe me when I say this, that a book is a living being. So, you underline, you make little notes, you become invested in the book. So that is what makes things even more interesting. So that is another thing that makes kind of inculcates that habit of reading when you become very invested in that one book.
Yes, so true then. So there you go. That was the very passionate, the voracious reader, Mrs. Aanchal Singh Rathore. Thank you so much, Mrs. Rathore, for taking your time on a Sunday afternoon. There are 1,000 things that you can do on a weekend, but you gracefully accept that.
Giving me an opportunity to dress up during this self-imposed lockdown.
It's so nice of you to say that. But thank you so much for joining us today. And I'm sure this segment will benefit all our viewers across in diverse backgrounds and age groups. And it could be a law student, lawyers, everybody. Reading is so important and it should be an integral part of our lives. Only if we were mentored or we were guided when we entered the profession, things had been so much different. So this was just an attempt to make you all understand the importance of reading habit in our lives. So thank you so much, Mrs. Rathore, for your time, effort that you put in for this stellar presentation, and this Q&A session that we decided to have for the first time. So thank you all for your patient viewing and for your patient hearing. And stay tuned. Next episode is on its way. Please like, subscribe, and share my channel. Stay home, stay indoors, stay safe. Venture out only when it's very essential. And please take good care of yourselves. Please take good care of your loved ones. And it's goodbye for now. Thank you, Mr. Doctor. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Take care, everyone.